Chapter 1. The Driveway. The suitcase wheels rattled over the concrete like a warning Dean couldn't quite interpret. He stood just inside the open front door, one hand on the frame, watching Kirsten drag her carry-on down the walkway with sharp, efficient steps. The morning was cool, gray light pooling in the driveway, the sky low and heavy as if it were holding its breath. "Did you remember the blue bottle?" she asked without turning around. Dean blinked. Yeah, the blue one. Morning and night. She stopped beside the car and finally looked at him. Not really at him, through him. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but her mouth was tight, controlled, already somewhere else. Not kind of Dean. Exactly like I wrote it out. Jordan can't miss a dose. Dean nodded, the motion automatic. I know. Kirsten popped the trunk and slid the suitcase inside. She moved fast, like she was late for something important, though they were ahead of schedule. She always was on mornings like this, trips, appointments, anything that took her away from the house. Efficient. Surgical. Inside, the house hummed with its usual quiet. The refrigerator's low buzz, the faint tick of the hallway clock, the distant murmur of daytime television drifting from Jordan's room upstairs. Dean glanced toward the staircase, instinctively counting the steps the way he always did, as if the number might change. "Kirst," he said, trying again. "You'll call when you land, right?" She shut the trunk harder than necessary. "I'll text." "Call," he repeated softly. "If you can." She sighed, already opening the driver's door. "Dean, it's 2 weeks. I need this break. You'll be fine. You'll be fine." The words landed with a familiar thud, like furniture dropped in a room he no longer lived in. He watched her slide into the seat, adjust the mirror, check her phone. She hadn't hugged Jordan goodbye. She never did on mornings like this. Said it made him emotional. His physical therapy exercises, she added, leaning across the center console. "Twice a day. Don't skip because he complains. And don't change anything. No improvising." "I won't," Dean said. "I've got it." Her gaze lingered on him for half a second longer than necessary, sharp and measuring. "In your coffee. I left the fresh grounds on the counter. Use those, not the old bag." Dean frowned. "What's wrong with it? Just do it," she snapped, then softened immediately. "Please. I don't want to worry." He raised his hands in surrender. "Okay. Fresh grounds." Satisfied, she started the engine. The car came alive with a low growl, vibrating through the driveway and into Dean's chest. For a moment, he thought she might look back, might roll down the window, and say something human, "I love you," or "take care of him," or even just bye. She didn't. The car reversed, tires crunching over gravel, then swung toward the street. She accelerated harder than usual, the back end fishtailing slightly as she took the corner. Then she was gone. Dean stood there longer than he meant to, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. The driveway looked wrong without her car, too wide, too exposed. He closed the door and locked out of habit, sliding the bolt home with a dull click. The quiet pressed in. He exhaled and rubbed his face, fingers dragging down over tired eyes. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of lifting, feeding, cleaning, counting pills. 2 weeks of pretending he wasn't exhausted down to his bones. "You can do this," he muttered to himself. He walked into the kitchen and set the kettle on the stove. His head felt thick, like it was stuffed with cotton. Mornings were always the worst, everything slightly out of focus, thoughts moving through syrup. He blamed the sleep deprivation, or stress, or age. 42 felt older than it should. The coffee grounds waited on the counter in a neat glass jar, just like Kirsten said. He measured them out carefully, hands steady from years of practice. He didn't trust himself to eyeball it anymore. Too easy to forget things. As the kettle heated, he glanced at the fridge. A color-coded schedule was taped to the door, covered in her handwriting. Jordan, 8 o'clock a.m. meds, 12 o'clock p.m. meds, 6 o'clock p.m. meds. Below that in smaller letters, Dean, morning only. He frowned at that, a faint unease stirring, then dismissed it. She knew more about medications than he did. She always said so. The kettle whistled. He poured the water slowly, breathing in the bitter, comforting smell as it bloomed. Coffee was the one thing that made mornings tolerable. He wrapped his hands around the mug like it could anchor him. "Dad!" Jordan's voice drifted down faintly from upstairs, thin through the walls. "I'm here," Dean called back. "Just making coffee. I'll be up in a minute." "Okay." The word carried more weight than it should have. Jordan always sounded older than 12. Too careful, too controlled. Dean blamed the accident for that, the way trauma rearranged a kid's insides. He took a sip of coffee. The taste was sharp, almost metallic, but he barely noticed. Another sip, then another. The fog in his head didn't lift, not really, but he welcomed the warmth anyway. 2 weeks, he reminded himself again. They'd survived worse. He leaned against the counter and closed his eyes for just a second. Images flickered behind his lids. Hospital hallways, the beep of monitors, Jordan's small body dwarfed by a bed that looked too big for him. Kirsten standing at the foot of it all, calm and commanding, telling doctors what they needed to know. A sound cut through the memory. A soft thump. Dean's eyes opened. He held his breath, listening. The television upstairs was still on, the low murmur unchanged. Then he heard it again, another sound, unmistakable this time. Footsteps. Slow, careful, coming from upstairs. Dean straightened, heart beginning to pound as the sound grew closer, each step landing with deliberate weight. Footsteps upstairs. Chapter 2, The Boy Who Stood Up. Dean froze in the middle of the kitchen, one hand still wrapped around his coffee mug, as the footsteps grew louder. They were wrong. That was the first thought that hit him. Too even, too controlled. Jordan's wheelchair had a specific sound, plastic wheels, a faint rattle, the soft scrape when it brushed the wall. These steps were bare feet on wood. Heel, toe, heel, toe. Jordan, Dean called, his voice already tightening. No answer. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Dean turned just as his son appeared in the doorway. For a split second, Dean's brain refused to assemble what his eyes were seeing. Jordan stood there, framed by the hallway light, both feet planted firmly on the floor. He wasn't leaning on the wall. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't dragging himself forward with his arms. He was standing. "Dad," Jordan said. His voice was low, urgent, older than it should have been. "We need to leave. Right now." The mug slipped from Dean's fingers and shattered against the tile. Coffee splashed across his shoes, but he didn't feel it. The world narrowed to the boy in front of him, his son, upright and breathing and impossibly whole. "Jay Jordan," Dean whispered. What are you doing?" Jordan took a step forward. Dean staggered back as if struck. No, don't move. You'll fall." "I won't," Jordan said. Another step, then another. His movements were cautious but controlled, like someone who had practiced this alone 1,000 times. "I can walk." Dean's knees buckled, and he caught himself on the counter. His heart hammered so hard it hurt. "This isn't funny," he said hoarsely. "If this is some kind of—" "It's not," Jordan cut in. "Dad, listen to me. We don't have time for this." Dean shook his head, tears blurring his vision. "You've been paralyzed for 6 years." Jordan flinched at the word. "I was injured. I wasn't paralyzed anymore after the first 2. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Dean laughed once, a broken sound. "You're confused. Your mom said—" Jordan's jaw tightened. "Mom lies." That stopped him. Jordan crossed the kitchen, reached out, and grabbed Dean's wrist. His grip was strong, real, warm. "I can walk," Jordan said again, slower this time. "I've been able to for 4 years. I just couldn't let her know." Dean stared down at the hand wrapped around his arm. He felt it. Every finger. Every ounce of pressure. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you? Why wouldn't you tell me?" Jordan's eyes filled, but his voice stayed steady. "Because I didn't know if I could trust anyone. Not even you." The words sliced deeper than any accusation. "Jordan, I'm sorry," his son said quickly. "I know that hurts. But if she found out I was getting better, she would have killed us." Dean's breath hitched. That's not. Your mother, she's not who you think she is," Jordan said. "And she's not on a girl's trip." Dean felt dizzy. He sank into a chair, gripping the edge of the table to keep from sliding to the floor. "You're scaring me." "I know," Jordan said softly. "But you need to trust me. Please." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking clock. Dean searched his son's face, really looked at him. The fear was real. The urgency. This wasn't a prank or a miracle or some hallucination born of exhaustion. How long? Dean asked. Jordan hesitated. I stood up the first time when I was 8. Dean squeezed his eyes shut. 8. For years of pretending. For years of lifting a child who didn't need to be carried. Why didn't I notice? Because you were tired, Jordan said. And because she made sure you never saw me alone. Dean's head snapped up. What does that mean? Jordan opened his mouth to answer, then froze. His eyes flicked past Dean, toward the front of the house. Dad, he said, barely above a whisper. We have to go. Now. What? What? Jordan moved to the window, peering through the narrow gap in the curtain. His face drained of color. They're early. Dean stood abruptly. Who's early? Jordan turned back to him, fear finally cracking his composure. The men Mom hired. Dean felt the room tilt. Hired for what? Jordan didn't answer. He was already moving, grabbing his backpack from behind the couch, shoving it toward Dean. Keys, Jordan said. Dad, get the car keys. Dean's hands shook as he reached into his pocket. Jordan, slow down. You can't just say things like that. There's a van, Jordan said, voice tight. Black. No plates on the front. Dean stepped toward the window, heart in his throat. You're imagining. The low rumble of an engine cut him off. They both turned toward the front door as the sound grew louder, heavier, unmistakable. Jordan swallowed. They weren't supposed to be here yet. Dean moved to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. A dark van rolled slowly into the driveway. The van pulled into the driveway. Chapter 3, The Escape. Dean didn't remember deciding to move. 1 second he was staring at the dark van idling in the driveway, his heart clawing up into his throat, and the next Jordan's hands were on his arm, steering him away from the window. Garage, Jordan whispered. Now. The word snapped Dean back into his body. He nodded once, sharply, and followed as Jordan moved fast and silent down the short hall. The house felt different, smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were listening. A heavy knock rattled the front door. Dean flinched. Jordan, don't answer, Jordan said. They won't wait. Another knock came, harder this time, followed by the scrape of metal against wood. Dean's stomach dropped. They reached the door to the garage. Jordan hesitated, listening, then nodded to himself. Go, he said. I'll hit the button. Dean yanked the door open and rushed inside. The air smelled like oil and old cardboard. He fumbled for the keys, hands shaking so badly he dropped them once before catching them against his leg. Behind him, the house groaned. A crash echoed from the front room, wood splintering, glass shattering. They're in, Jordan said. The garage door whined as it began to lift. Dean shoved the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine coughed, then caught. He slammed the car into reverse, just as the door cleared enough space to escape. A shadow moved at the edge of the garage, someone rounding the corner of the house. Go! Jordan shouted. Dean floored it. The tires screamed as the car shot backward, narrowly missing the garbage cans, then spun onto the street. He didn't stop until he was 3 houses down, lungs burning, pulse roaring in his ears. Seatbelt, Jordan said automatically, already clicking his own into place. Dean did the same, his hands still trembling. Jesus, he breathed. Jesus Christ. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The van sat in their driveway, its side door sliding open. 2 figures jumped out, faces hidden behind dark masks. They'll follow, Dean said. Not right away, Jordan replied. They think we're still inside. Dean swallowed hard and turned onto the main road, forcing himself to obey every traffic signal, every speed limit. His heart wanted him to run. Jordan wanted him invisible. After a mile, Dean finally spoke. Tell me, he said. Tell me everything. Now. Jordan stared straight ahead. She's been drugging you. Dean laughed weakly. No, she wouldn't. Your coffee, Jordan said. Every morning. Low-dose sedatives. Something to make you foggy. Forgetful. Compliant. Dean's grip tightened on the wheel. That's not possible. I tested it, Jordan said quietly. I switched your cup with mine once. I slept for 14 hours. Dean's chest constricted. Images flooded back, missed appointments, conversations he couldn't remember finishing, the constant exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to touch. "And me?" Dean asked, already afraid of the answer. Jordan hesitated. "She started after I began improving. Pills in my food, in my drinks, things that weakened my legs, slowed my reflexes." Dean felt sick. "That's why you pretended to get worse," Jordan finished. "If she thought I was failing, she stopped increasing the dose." Dean's eyes burned. "All this time," he whispered, "all this suffering." Jordan nodded. "She needed us helpless." A car honked behind them. Dean jolted and focused back on the road. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jordan's voice softened. "Because you loved her, and because she made sure you were never clear-headed long enough to question her." Dean swallowed hard. "I should have seen it." "No," Jordan said firmly. "She planned it." They drove in silence for several minutes, the city blurring past. Dean's hands ached from gripping the wheel. His mind reeled, trying to rearrange 6 years of memories into a shape that made sense. "Those men," Dean said finally. "What were they going to do?" Jordan didn't answer right away. He watched a red light turn green. "They were supposed to make it look like an accident," he said. "A fire. You asleep upstairs. Me trapped in my room." Dean's breath hitched. "And you?" Jordan met his eyes. "They didn't expect me to walk." Dean's chest tightened painfully. "I won't let them hurt you." Jordan shook his head. "You already did. By running." Dean blinked. "What?" "They want us in that house," Jordan said. "Every step away from it is a problem for them." Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Dean flinched, but Jordan remained calm. "Where are we going?" Dean asked. Jordan reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper, smoothing it against his knee. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere she doesn't know about." Dean nodded, trusting him without hesitation now. "Tell me where to turn." Jordan leaned forward, eyes scanning the road ahead, voice steady despite everything. Ends with Jordan directing Dean to a storage facility. Chapter 4, Storage Unit 247. The storage facility sat behind a row of closed auto shops, a long stretch of beige metal doors baking under the afternoon sun. Dean slowed the car, heart still hammering, and rolled past the office twice before Jordan nodded. "Here," Jordan said. "Second row, near the back." Dean turned in, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The place was quiet in the way forgotten places were. No voices, no music, just the hum of distant traffic and the occasional metallic clatter as someone else closed a unit far away. He parked beside a door marked 247 and cut the engine. Jordan was already unbuckled. "Wait," Dean said. "Let me." Jordan shook his head and stepped out on his own, stretching his legs like he'd just woken from a long sleep. Dean watched him, chest tight, still half expecting the ground to give way beneath his son's feet. Jordan crouched and lifted the edge of the door. "Help me with this." Dean grabbed the handle and pulled. The door rattled up, revealing darkness, and then light snapped on. Dean froze. Inside the unit was not boxes, not furniture, not the dusty chaos of a life in storage. It was a room. Tables lined the walls, covered in laptops, hard drives, neatly labeled folders. A monitor bank glowed softly at the far end, divided into small squares. Live feeds of rooms Dean recognized instantly. The kitchen, the living room, Jordan's bedroom, their front door. "Oh my God," Dean breathed. Jordan stepped inside and flicked another switch. A small fan whirred to life. "Close the door," he said. "Please." Dean obeyed, the metal door thudding shut behind them. The sound echoed, final and enclosing. He turned slowly, taking it all in. "You built all this?" "Not all at once," Jordan said. "And not alone." Dean's head snapped toward him. "Who helped you?" Jordan hesitated, then gestured to a name written on one of the folders. "P. Costello." Dean frowned. "Who's that?" Jordan swallowed. "My mom's first husband." The name felt like a key turning somewhere deep inside Dean's chest. "She never talks about him. She doesn't like questions," Jordan said quietly. He crossed the room and tapped a keyboard. One of the monitors changed, pulling up a grainy video file. He rented this unit. "I found the paperwork hidden in the house." Years ago, the video began to play. A man stood in a kitchen Dean didn't recognize, smiling awkwardly at the camera. He looked tired. "Kind. My name is Paul Costello," the man said. If you're watching this, something went wrong. Dean's throat closed. Jordan paused the video. He died in a house fire. Officially, accidental. Dean stared at the frozen image. And unofficially, Jordan reached into a drawer and pulled out a small evidence bag. Inside were pills, different shapes, different colors. Same sedative she used on you, he said. Different doses. Dean's hand shook as he took the bag. Jesus. Jordan moved methodically now, opening drawers, pulling out binders. He started suspecting her. Started collecting evidence. He hid here. Why didn't the police find it? Dean asked. Jordan met his eyes. Because no one looked. Because she cried and told a good story. Dean felt something harden inside him. Anger. Clarity. Jordan turned back to the monitors. One showed the front of their house. The door hung open, dark figures moving inside. They're searching, Dean said. I know, Jordan replied. That's why we had to come now. Dean followed as Jordan opened a cabinet, revealing rows of label drives. Dates, times, names. You've been watching them? Watching her, Jordan said. For years. Dean sank onto a folding chair, legs weak, all while pretending you couldn't walk. Jordan's voice softened. It was the only way to stay alive. He pulled out another folder and handed it to Dean. Inside were photos, burned rooms, fire reports, insurance documents. Different houses, different cities. Dean looked up slowly. These aren't ours. Jordan shook his head. No. Dean flipped through the pages, dread pooling in his stomach. How many? Jordan hesitated. I'm still counting. Dean stood abruptly, pacing the small space. This is insane. We should go to the police. Not yet, Jordan said. Not until it's complete. Dean turned on him. Complete. Jordan's gaze flicked to the screens again. She planned everything. Timing. Witnesses. Evidence. If we go too soon, she walks. Dean ran a hand through his hair. You're 12. Jordan didn't look away. I didn't get to be. The words landed heavy between them. Jordan reached in his backpack and pulled out one last folder. This one was thicker than the rest. Inside were names. Dates. Connections drawn in careful ink. Dean's eyes widened. This is a pattern, Jordan said. A system. Dean looked at his son, really looked at him, the calm focus, the quiet resolve, and felt a chill crawl up his spine. This wasn't just about us, Jordan said. Ends with Jordan revealing this was never an isolated crime. Chapter 5. The Family Business. Dean stared at the folder in his hands as if it might start breathing. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, but the handwriting was precise. Names, dates, locations, insurance amounts written neatly in the margins, like grocery totals. Dean flipped a page and felt his stomach drop. This can't be real, he said hoarsely. Jordan stood beside the monitor wall, arms folded, watching his father carefully. I wish it wasn't. Dean looked up. Jordan, these are people. Families. I know, Jordan said. I read every obituary. Dean's eyes burned. He forced himself to keep turning pages. A man drowned while fishing. A woman killed by a faulty heater. A couple lost in a highway accident. Different states. Different years. Same pattern. Recently increased life insurance policies. Sudden tragedy. Grieving wives who moved on quickly. These women, Dean said slowly. They're related. Some by blood. Some by marriage, Jordan replied. Some recruited later. Dean lowered himself into the chair again, legs barely holding him. Your mother taught them? Jordan shook his head. Her mother did. He typed something into the keyboard, and a new screen filled the central monitor. An older woman appeared on it. Gray hair pulled tight, posture straight, eyes sharp with intelligence and something colder. Marjorie Cunningham, Jordan said. My grandmother. Dean swallowed. She seemed so normal. She is, Jordan said. That's the point. He clicked again. The screen split into multiple windows, phone recordings, emails, financial spreadsheets. Jordan pointed. She teaches them how to choose men. Stable jobs. No close family. Good insurance benefits. Dean's hands clenched. Like me. Jordan met his eyes. Like you. Dean looked away, shame and fury twisting together in his chest. How did you find all this? By listening, Jordan said. By pretending to be asleep. By pretending I was stupid. He pulled up an audio file and pressed play. Marjorie's voice filled the unit, warm, gentle, instructional. "Accidents are grief-proof," she said calmly. "No one argues with fire or water." Dean slapped a hand over his mouth. Jordan stopped the recording. "That was 6 years ago." Dean's vision blurred. "She was teaching your mother how to kill us." Jordan nodded. "And how to get away with it." He opened another folder, this one thicker than the rest. Inside were photos of women Dean recognized vaguely, neighbors, friends of friends, people he'd seen at family gatherings. "They're part of it?" Dean asked. "Some," Jordan said. "Others didn't last." Dean frowned. "Didn't last?" Jordan's jaw tightened. "If someone hesitated, if they talked too much." Dean felt cold all over. "Jesus." Jordan leaned against the table now, the weight of years pressing into his small frame. "They call insurance," he said quietly. "That's their word for it. A way out. A guarantee." Dean stared at his son. "How many?" Jordan took a breath. "Confirmed?" 16. Dean closed his eyes. 16 lives. 16 endings disguised as bad luck. "And suspected?" Dean asked. Jordan hesitated. "More." Dean rubbed his face with both hands. "All this time, family dinners, holidays, they talked around it," Jordan said. "Like it was normal. Like recipes." Dean looked at the screens again, suddenly unable to tell where his life ended and someone else's began. "Why haven't they been caught?" Jordan shrugged slightly. "Different jurisdictions. Accidents don't get reopened. And they never repeat the same method too, close together." Dean exhaled sharply. "Fire. Drowning. Crashes." Jordan nodded. "Keeps it random." Silence settled in the unit, thick and suffocating. The hum of electronics sounded too loud. Dean stood and paced again, fists clenched. "So what was I?" Jordan didn't answer right away. "A candidate?" Dean pressed. Jordan's voice was barely audible. "An investment." The word hit harder than any accusation. Dean stopped pacing. "And you?" Jordan looked down. "Collateral." Dean crossed the space in 2 strides and pulled his son into a hug, gripping him like he might disappear. Jordan stiffened for a second, then relaxed, arms wrapping around Dean's waist. "I'm sorry," Dean whispered. "I'm so sorry." Jordan nodded against his chest. "I know." They separated reluctantly. Jordan wiped his face and turned back to the screens. "There's more." Dean braced himself. Jordan pulled up a live feed from their house. The masked men moved methodically now, opening drawers, checking vents. One of them laughed as he knocked over Jordan's wheelchair. Dean's vision went red. "Those are the men from earlier." Jordan zoomed in on one of the figures. "Vince Humphrey," he said, "and Randall Piper." Dean stared. "You know their names?" Jordan nodded. "They don't work for the family directly. They're hired." Dean's heart pounded. "Hired for what?" Jordan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Clean up," he said. "Enforcement. Making accidents look convincing." Dean felt the last pieces click into place, the rush to leave, the early arrival, the way Kirsten hadn't looked back. "They weren't there to scare us," Dean said slowly. Jordan met his eyes, expression grim. Ends with confirmation the men chasing them are hired killers. Chapter 6, The Waiting Game. The motel sat off the highway like it had given up trying to be found. A flickering sign buzzed overhead. One letter burned out, so the name read more like a warning than an invitation. Dean pulled into a parking space near the back, killed the engine, and sat there with both hands on the wheel, listening to it tick as it cooled. Jordan checked the lot through the side mirror. "We're clear," he said. Dean nodded, but didn't move. The adrenaline had drained, leaving him hollow and shaky. "Under whose name?" he asked. Jordan held up a key card. "Paul Costello." Dean swallowed. Even now, the name carried weight. Ghosts had a way of following them. Inside, the room smelled like detergent and old carpet. 2 beds, a small table, a TV bolted to the dresser. Dean locked the door, then the chain, then leaned his forehead against the wood for a moment longer than necessary. Jordan dropped his backpack on the bed and began unpacking with practiced efficiency: laptop, cables, a small router, a power strip. "You've done this before," Dean said quietly. Jordan didn't look up. "Not like this." Dean sat on the edge of the other bed, watching his son move. There was no hesitation in him, no wasted motion. It was the opposite of childhood. Talk to me, Dean said. About all of it. Jordan paused, then nodded. Okay. He sat across from Dean, elbows on his knees. When I stopped taking the pills, my legs started responding again. Slowly. I practiced at night. I used the wheelchair as cover, leaning, shifting weight. I learned how to fake pain. Dean winced. You were 8. I had to be convincing, Jordan said. If I slipped, it was over. Dean's throat tightened. And the rest. Jordan shrugged slightly. When you're stuck in bed, people underestimate you. They talk. They leave things lying around. I listened. I watched. He gestured to the laptop. I taught myself medicine first. Just enough to understand what she was giving us. Toxicology forums. Old textbooks. Library databases. Dean stared at him. You learned that on your own? Jordan nodded. Then computers. Cameras. Networking. I figured if she was watching us, I needed to watch her back. Dean looked away, chest aching. I should have protected you. Jordan shook his head. You did. You stayed. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. How did you pay for all this? Dean asked eventually. Jordan hesitated. Paul left money. Hidden accounts. He didn't trust banks. Dean closed his eyes. He knew. He suspected, Jordan said. Enough to plan. Dean exhaled slowly. And the plan now? Jordan's gaze hardened. We wait. Dean snapped his head up. Wait for what? For them to find us. No, Jordan said. For them to do exactly what they were hired to do. Dean stood abruptly and began pacing the narrow room. That's insane. We should go to the FBI. Now. We will, Jordan said calmly. With proof that can't be ignored. Dean stopped. You're talking about letting them expose themselves, Jordan finished. On camera. Dean rubbed his temples. You're asking me to trust that my house will be burned down. Jordan met his eyes. It was always going to be. The truth of that landed hard. Dean slumped back onto the bed. You're 12. Jordan's voice softened. I know. Dean looked at his son and finally allowed himself to see the cost. The way Jordan's shoulders stayed tight, even at rest. The way his eyes tracked every sound. You didn't get to be a kid, Dean said. Jordan shrugged, but his eyes shone. I'll get to be one later. Dean pulled him into a hug, holding on longer this time. I promise you, he whispered. You will. Jordan nodded against his chest. We just have to finish this first. They separated, and Jordan stood, energy returning. We need to set up. Dean watched as his son transformed the motel room. Router plugged in, laptop open, cables snaking across the table. His fingers flew over the keys. What if something goes wrong? Dean asked. Jordan didn't look up. It already did. Years ago, a soft chime sounded. Jordan straightened. They've entered the house. Dean's heart jumped. Already, Jordan clicked, pulling up a familiar layout. Rooms he knew by heart, now seen through cold digital eyes. The screens flickered. One by one, the camera feeds came online. Ends with live camera feeds activating inside the house. Chapter 7. The fire is set. The first thing Dean noticed on the screen was how ordinary the house looked. The kitchen lights were still on. The hallway clock still ticked. Jordan's wheelchair sat exactly where Dean had left it, angled slightly toward the wall, as if waiting for someone who would never sit in it again. Seeing it like that, empty, obedient, made Dean's chest ache. They're in, Jordan said quietly. Dean leaned closer to the table. The motel room felt too small, too still. On the laptop, the front door camera shook as the door was pushed fully open. 2 men stepped inside, silhouettes first, then faces as they moved beneath the hallway light. Masks, gloves, no hesitation. One of them nudged the door, closed with his boot. Clear, he said. Dean flinched at the sound of a stranger's voice in his home. Jordan zoomed in, fingers steady. Vince is on the left. Randall's the taller one. The men moved like professionals. No wasted motion, no raised voices. They checked corners, peeked into rooms, confirmed what they already knew. Place is empty, Randall said. Kid's gone. Vince snorted. Doesn't matter. Boss wants it clean. Dean's jaw clenched. They talk like it's nothing. They do this a lot, Jordan replied. The camera in the living room caught Vince, knocking Jordan's wheelchair over with his foot. It clattered to the floor, metal striking wood. 6 years, and he still couldn't get up, Vince said with a laugh. Poor little guy. Dean surged to his feet. Turn it off. Jordan shook his head. We need it. Vince crouched beside the wheelchair, mockingly adjusting the footrests. You know how much these things cost? Insurance probably loved this one. Randall checked his watch. We on schedule. Yeah, Vince said. Midnight ignition. Plenty of time. Dean's heart pounded. Midnight. Jordan nodded once. That was the plan. The men split up. One headed toward the bedrooms. The other went to the garage. On screen, the camera feeds shifted as Jordan rearranged them. For at once, then 6, then 12. Talk to me, Dean said, voice tight. What are you doing? Jordan opened his second laptop. I'm going in. Into what? Marjorie's server. Dean stared at him. Now, she'll be watching the feeds too, Jordan said. She always does. Dean felt a chill. She's watching them do this. Jordan's fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled past, reflected in his eyes. She keeps everything, he said. Records. Proof. She thinks control means never deleting anything. On the house feed, Randall pulled the device from his backpack and began attaching it beneath the staircase. Small. Compact. That's an accelerant, Dean said. Jordan nodded absently. She labeled the folders by year. Dean's head snapped back to the laptop. What? Jordan's breathing quickened as another screen filled with files. I'm in. Dean sat heavily on the bed. Jordan, I've got it, Jordan said. Just give me a minute. Folders opened one after another. Names. Dates. Spreadsheets tracking payouts down to the sent audio files labeled instruction and review. Jordan clicked one open. Marjorie's voice filled the room again, calm and precise. Fire is reliable, she said. Smoke erases details. Survivors forget. Dean felt sick. How many? Jordan swallowed. More than I thought. On screen, Vince entered Jordan's bedroom. He paused, looking around at the posters still taped to the wall, the books on the shelf. Feels wrong, he muttered. Randall's voice crackled through his earpiece. Don't get sentimental. Vince snorted and reached under the bed, pulling out another device. Kid won't need it. Dean clenched his fists. They're monsters. They're tools, Jordan said. She's the architect. The second laptop chimed. Jordan froze. What? Dean asked. She just logged in, Jordan whispered. Dean's pulse thundered. Marjorie. Jordan nodded, eyes locked on the screen. She's checking progress. He typed faster, rerouting traffic, copying files. She's got backups on backups. She never thought anyone would be watching her watch them. On the house feed, Randall moved into the kitchen, opening cabinets. Coffee's still warm, he said. Vince laughed. Guess Daddy didn't get far. Dean lunged forward before he could stop himself, hand striking the table. She was poisoning me. Jordan didn't look up. I know. The motel room filled with the soft sounds of technology, fans, keystrokes, digital chimes. Outside, a truck roared past on the highway, oblivious. Jordan's screen flooded with data now, email chains spanning decades, wire transfers, scan policies. I've got them, he breathed. All of them. Dean's eyes stung. Is it enough? Jordan nodded. It's more than enough. On the house feed, Vince finished wiring the last device. He wiped his hands on his jeans. All set. Randall checked his watch again. We're early. Vince shrugged. Doesn't matter. Fire doesn't care about schedules. Jordan stiffened. What? Dean asked. Jordan's eyes darted between screens. He just armed it. Dean's breath caught. But you said, I know. Jordan said, fingers moving frantically. Something's wrong. On screen, a small red light blinked to life beneath the stairs. Vince stepped back. Let's go. A low hump echoed through the speakers. Flames bloomed across the kitchen feed. Too fast, too bright. Jordan stared at the screen, horror and calculation colliding in his eyes. It's early, he whispered. Ends on the fire ignites earlier than planned. Chapter 8. A father runs back. The motel room smelled like old detergent and burnt coffee. The air conditioner rattled as if it were coughing itself awake, and the glow from Jordan's laptop painted his face in a pale, underwater blue. Dean stood behind him, hands braced on the back of the chair, watching the familiar rooms of his own house fracture into pixels. Flames licked the baseboards in the living room camera. Smoke smeared the lens in gray fingerprints. Somewhere inside the walls, something popped, sharp and metallic, then went quiet again. Jordan leaned forward, fingers flying. Okay, the timers were set for midnight. We still have? He froze. Dean felt it before he understood it. A tightening in his chest, like a string pulled too hard. What? Dean asked. Jordan didn't look up. His eyes flicked from one camera feed to another. Kitchen. Hallway. Jordan's bedroom. No, Jordan whispered. Dean stepped closer. What do you mean, no? Jordan's voice thinned. The safe. Dean's mind stumbled. What's safe? Jordan finally turned. For the first time since they fled the house, he looked 12. Not brilliant. Not armored. Just a kid who had miscalculated. The fireproof one, he said. The original documents. Paul's handwritten notes. The micro drives that aren't backed up yet. Dean's stomach dropped. They're not uploaded? Dean asked. Most of it is, Jordan said quickly. But not all. The chain of custody stuff. The early stuff. The handwriting analysis. I kept it offline on purpose. Where? Dean asked, even though a part of him already knew. Jordan swallowed. My room. Closet. Behind the false panel. The camera feed from that room flickered. Smoke poured along the ceiling like a dark tide. Fire crawled up the curtains, slow and hungry. Dean straightened. No, Jordan said immediately. Dad, no. Dean reached for his jacket. Dad. Jordan said again, louder now. You can't. The house is already compromised. The gas lines. I know the house, Dean said. His voice surprised him with how steady it sounded. I know where everything is. Jordan pushed back from the desk, so hard the chair leg screeched. You'll die. Dean met his son's eyes. So might the truth. Jordan shook his head. We can rebuild the case. We can. Dean crouched in front of him. Smoke from the screen reflected in Jordan's pupils, turning them into small, burning windows. Dean placed his hands on Jordan's knees, feeling the solid warmth there, grounding himself in it. You did everything right, Dean said softly. You did more than anyone should ever have to do. This part. He forced a small smile. This part is mine. Jordan's jaw trembled. I don't want to be alone. Dean's chest tightened. He pulled Jordan into a hug, fierce and brief, like he was bracing them both against an oncoming wave. You won't be, Dean said. I promise. He stood before Jordan could argue again, grabbed the motel key, and was out the door. The night air hit him like a slap. Sirens wailed somewhere distant, too distant. Dean slid into the driver's seat, hands shaking now, and turned the key. The engine roared to life. As he drove, the house loomed larger in his mind with every block. Every memory sharpened into a map. The loose stair tread, the sticky cabinet door, the way the hallway light flickered before it died. He pulled up 2 houses down and ran. Heat slammed into him as soon as he hit the driveway. Flames punched out a front window, coughing sparks into the night. Smoke rolled thick and choking, and the air smelled like burning plastic and something sweet and wrong. Dean yanked his shirt over his nose and burst through the front door. The house screamed. Fire roared through the living room, chewing the couch to blackened ribs. Dean ducked low, eyes watering, lungs burning. He moved by muscle memory, counting steps in his head. Hallway. 3 steps. Left. Something crashed behind him. He didn't look. Jordan's room was an inferno waiting to happen. Flames clawed at the bed frame. The walls sweated heat. Dean dropped to his knees by the closet, fingers scrabbling at the hidden panel. Come on, he coughed. The panel gave way. Inside, the fireproof safe sat exactly where Jordan had said it would be. Dean wrapped his arms around it and heaved. It was heavier than he remembered. The house groaned. A sharp hiss cut through the roar. Gas, unmistakable. Dean staggered into the hallway, the safe digging into his ribs. The heat intensified, a living thing pressing against his skin. Almost, he muttered, whether to himself or the house. He wasn't sure. The explosion lifted him off his feet. The world turned white. Dean hit the ground hard, the safe clutched to his chest. Pain flared everywhere at once, his legs, his arms, his face. The sky above him spun, choked with smoke and falling ash. The house collapsed inward with a sound like a giant exhaling its last breath. Dean tried to sit up. Failed. Sirens screamed, closer now. Red lights smeared across the smoke. Boots pounded the pavement. Someone shouted. Someone else shouted his name. Dean's vision tunneled. The last thing he felt was the hard edge of the safe beneath his hand, still there. Then his strength gave out, and he collapsed as firefighters reached him. Chapter 9. The net closes. Dean lay on the gurney as the paramedics worked around him. The air smelled of smoke, antiseptic, and fear. The fear that had chased him from the house and hadn't yet left his chest. His clothes were scorched, skin raw and blistered, but he was alive. Through the haze of pain, he heard a voice that made his heart leap. Dad! Jordan, alive, standing at the edge of the hospital room, cheeks streaked with tears and ash from the night's chaos. He ran forward, arms flinging around Dean's neck. Dean's own arms trembled as he held his son tight. I'm here, he whispered, voice hoarse. I'm here. Jordan pulled back slightly, searching Dean's face with those sharp, intelligent eyes. You're really here, he said. I was so scared. Dean kissed the top of his son's head. I told you I'd handle this part. Jordan wiped at his face. We did it, he said, a small smile breaking through. The evidence is safe. Dean nodded slowly, letting the weight of survival sink in. And Marjorie? Kirsten. Jordan picked up the folder from his backpack. It was heavy, thick with decades of proof, emails, scanned insurance policies, audio files, video footage of the men planting incendiaries, Marjorie's own instructions, and meticulous notes. Everything, he said. Hours later, in a secure FBI conference room, Dean and Jordan sat across from Agent Sam Osborne. The room smelled of coffee and determination. Osborne, sharp-eyed and professional, scanned the evidence like a hawk. Let me get this straight, Osborne said, voice low but firm. You're telling me there's a family network that's been murdering men for insurance payouts for decades, covering it up with staged accidents, and you've documented it all? Jordan leaned forward. Yes, sir. Every step, everything is traceable. Dean added, still exhausted. They've already killed 16 confirmed victims, possibly more. And they use hired operatives. Vince Humphrey and Randall Piper were involved in tonight's arson. Osborne nodded, flipping through the stack of files. You've got us a slam dunk if the chain of evidence holds. Jordan watched the agent carefully. We also have surveillance of their communications, their server logs, even recorded instructions from Marjorie herself. Osborne's brow lifted. Recorded instructions? Dean glanced at Jordan. Audio files. Years' worth. She talks like a teacher explaining a recipe. The agent raised an eyebrow, impressed. This is extraordinary. Hours stretched into days. FBI teams moved quickly, making coordinated arrests across several states. Kirsten was taken from her luxury condo, her face a mask of shock and disbelief as agents read her rights. Marjorie was caught in a quiet suburb, still clutching her planner, the spine of control crumbling. Vince and Randall were apprehended mid-flight, surprised but resigned. Dean and Jordan were present at several arrests, watching the long arm of justice reach out and grab those who had thrived on deception and murder. The power of evidence, meticulously collected, made it all possible. Every piece of this, Dean whispered to Jordan during a brief break, was your work. Jordan shrugged. I just watched and remembered. You kept me alive, Dad. I just made sure we had a plan. Dean squeezed his son's shoulder. You were never helpless. Not once. Even as the arrests continued and the charges piled up, murder, arson, conspiracy, insurance fraud, Dean felt the weight lift slightly. Each handcuff click, each reading of rights, echoed the validation of years of suffering finally acknowledged. Kirsten sat in the holding cell, her hands folded, eyes wide. For the first time, she looked small, the carefully cultivated armor of control stripped away. Across the room, Jordan's name was whispered by agents and staff. Quietly, she realized what Dean and the FBI already knew. He had seen it all. He had recorded it all. And he had survived. A shiver passed through her as the truth settled in. Jordan had never been helpless. Chapter 10. After the Ashes. The sunlight hit Dean Harris's room in pale streaks, slipping through the half-open blinds. It felt almost alien, a world of clarity he hadn't known in years. The fog, the daily numbness from the long-term poisoning Kirsten had imposed, was fading. He could think, breathe, and remember without a persistent, dull ache clouding every thought. Dean sat up, wincing slightly as his body adjusted. The burns had healed more slowly than he anticipated, but the worst of the pain had subsided. His mind was alert now, sharp. He reached for his cup of tea on the bedside table, savoring the warmth as if it were a balm for more than just his throat. "Morning." Jordan's voice came from the doorway, cautious. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, eyes wary despite the slight smile tugging at his lips. Dean looked at him, truly looked, seeing the lines of anxiety that hadn't been there before. "Morning," he said softly. "Sleep okay?" Jordan shrugged, moving into the room. "I tried. Dreams, bad dreams." Dean patted the bed beside him. "Come here. Talk to me." Jordan hesitated, then perched on the edge. "I keep expecting something else to happen. Like I need to be ready to run. I wake up counting exits." Dean listened, heart tight. "I know. It'll take time." "I know," Jordan whispered, but his voice carried the weight of years lived in constant vigilance. "I feel like I can't stop doing it." Dean placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "You can, step by step. You'll learn it's safe to stay in one place. And I'll be here." Jordan looked up, eyes shimmering. "Even when I screw up?" "Especially then," Dean said with a small smile. "We're going to figure this out together." Later that morning, they met with the financial team assigned to reclaim the stolen insurance money. Jordan watched silently as lawyers and accountants combed through policies and payment records. Dean, still frail but determined, spoke with precise authority, ensuring every stolen dollar was tracked and reclaimed. The satisfaction in Dean's expression was subtle, a quiet victory, but Jordan noticed. "This is all real," he murmured. Dean nodded. "It is. Every bit of it. Your dad's alive. You're alive. And now the people who took advantage of that are facing justice." Even as the money was recovered, Dean insisted on visiting families of victims. Jordan hesitated at first, anxious about emotional confrontation, but Dean insisted. They went from city to city, meeting spouses, children, and parents left behind by the murderous schemes of Kirsten and Marjorie. In a small living room, Dean handed over a folder of video evidence to the widow of Paul Costello, Kirsten's first husband. Her hand shook as she accepted it, tears streaking her cheeks. They were never caught," she whispered. "And now this. You've given me answers I thought I'd never get." Dean nodded, voice steady but gentle. "They wanted to erase everything. But truth has a way of surviving." Jordan stood beside him quietly, listening. Each visit etched a deeper understanding into him. Justice wasn't only about punishment, it was about acknowledging pain, giving closure, letting survivors reclaim their own narratives. Evenings were different now. Dean and Jordan began sitting on the porch of their new home, small gestures of normality reintroducing themselves into their lives. Dean would make tea. Jordan would flip through comic books or sketch quietly in a notebook. Silence was no longer tense. It became companionable. "Dad," Jordan said one evening, looking up at the orange streaks of sunset, "do you think it'll ever feel normal?" Dean considered it, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know if it ever will. But normal doesn't have to be what it was before. Normal can be this. Safe, together, honest." Jordan nodded slowly, drawing in a deep breath. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the fading sun seep in. "I think I like that version." Therapy sessions were slow at first. Jordan's first meetings with the trauma specialist were tense. He clenched his fists, tensed his shoulders, scanned the room for exits even as the therapist spoke gently. Dean watched through the observation glass, heart aching for the boy who had never truly been free. "I'll get there," Jordan said quietly after one session, words more to himself than anyone else. "You already have," Dean whispered back, standing outside the room. "Every day, you've survived more than most could imagine. Therapy is just learning how to live with that, not under it." The legal process continued simultaneously. Kirsten and Marjorie's trials dominated headlines, but Dean and Jordan stayed grounded, attending only when absolutely necessary. Jordan's evidence was airtight, leaving prosecutors with little room for argument. As the gavel came down and sentences were handed, life without parole for Kirsten, lengthy imprisonment for Marjorie and the accomplices, Dean felt a sense of closure he hadn't known existed. One evening, as the house quieted around them, Dean and Jordan sat together, reviewing family photos restored from files Jordan had salvaged. Smiles caught in a frozen frame of old vacations, birthdays, and fleeting normality. Dean exhaled. "We lost a lot, but we kept each other." Jordan nodded. "And that's what matters." Dean reached over and ruffled his son's hair. "We rebuild, brick by brick, and you're never alone in it." Jordan's lips curved into a small, tired smile. "I know." As night fell, the house settled around them. The shadows of the past lingered at the edges, but inside, there was warmth, light, and safety. Dean reflected on the journey. 6 years of deception, manipulation, and fear, now transformed into victory, healing, and truth. In the quiet of the home, Jordan looked up from his sketches and said, "Dad, justice burned everything, but we survived. The truth survived too." Dean nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes, son, and that's all that really matters." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the smell of rain and renewal. Inside, a father and son, scarred but unbroken, finally began the long, steady work of living.